to Reading the List, where we review, discuss, and reimagine popular movie lists objectively. We're your hosts. I'm Jerry.
And I'm Brad. And on this episode, we'll be exploring number 34 from Sports Illustrated's The Top 50 Sports Movies of All Time.
All right, and number 34 is Everybody's All-American. Released in 1988, directed by Taylor Hackford, starring Jessica Lange, Dennis Quaid, and Timothy Hutton.
Collegiate champion football running back Gavin Gray goes from the top of the world to an unsuccessful professional football career, which leads to a dissatisfied life when he realizes he's no longer the hero he once was.
So this movie really dives deep into what happens when you peak in high school.
Well, he peaked in college, but yeah.
College. Okay. What happens when you peak in college?
Or just young. When you peak young.
When you peak young, and, what do you do? Like, what happens? And I thought it was a very interesting story. I think it was kind of like, he's in college, everybody worshiped the ground he walked on. Yeah, really.
He's the best college football player in the country, which one of the things that, kind of isn't talked about in those kinds of situations is when that happens, you're going to get picked by the worst team in the NFL.
Yeah.
Which is what happens. He gets picked by a really bad, Washington Redskins team. They're terrible, and he just gets the crap beat out of him, but, because, they have no offensive line. Plus, he's going from college to the pros. It's a different game. The speed of the game is different, and, he's no longer, the big fish in a small pond. He's just another fish in a really big pond.
Mm-hmm.
And, he has a fairly lengthy career, but nowhere near as successful as he was in college. He's basically a journeyman. He plays for, I think, 13 years or something like that. And
Roughly.
then... Yeah, and then, he actually retires and comes back and tries to make a comeback, which doesn't work out either. And in the midst of all this, when he first encounters Jessica Lange, she's I forget what they call her.
Oh, yeah, she's Miss...
They're in Louisiana, so
Miss Louisiana or Miss, their town or whatever.
Yeah, she's a beauty queen type.
Yeah.
And, over the course of... the 25 years that this story takes place, she evolves. She becomes a businesswoman, and, she goes above and beyond what, society kind of expected her to be. She's more than, just a pretty woman on his arm.
Which he cannot handle.
He can't handle it, which is true of a lot of men have a real difficult time dealing with a successful woman. It's very, very strange kind of ego thing.
It's very weird. And all the performances were really outstanding. It's a very tragic story. I felt it was very tragic, at least for him, and seeing his side of things, where he went from being here to being down here. He knew nothing else but football. Yeah. So it wasn't like he could go and start a different career and do something else with his life. He had to stick with football. And his wife, though, yes, she was very successful and she came into her own, but she was still under his shadow her whole life. Yeah. Even when she was in business at the restaurant and doing all that, it was still circled around him and his achievements. And it was
she got some of her early opportunities because of his name.
And I think that over the years,
there's some resentment.
Lots of resentment between the two of them. And they just kind of grew apart because of that, in a way. The ending shows them all kissing and making up, but I don't buy it, really. I didn't really... The ending to me was just okay.
This is as good. I think for him it was this is as good as it gets. And for her it's she loves the man that he used to be, and she's just kind of being a proper wife of that time.
Yeah, yeah. And it's just, yeah, it was really sad.
And it's like everyone else in the story kind of rises above. Like there's this black character who he was probably equally as good a football player, and because of circumstances he wasn't able to go to college and therefore didn't have a professional career, but he ends up having this really successful career as a business person. And there's a scene where, you know, Dennis Quaid, you know, to his credit, and you know, he's trying to be a good person, and he generally is a good person. He gets this guy a look, basically like, hey, you know, they're gonna take a look at you, you know, the Redskins, you know, can you imagine the two of us playing together? And the guy's like, you know, that's just not my life. You know, appreciate it, but that's not my life anymore. You know, I've got this other thing going. You know, football is behind me. I don't think about it anymore. And to Dennis Quaid, it's like, how could you think about anything else?
Well, and I think that because he was so regarded as a football player in college, he's stuck.
Yeah.
He's stuck. There's like, you know, well, even if he wanted to do something else,
he made no plans to do something else.
He was great at something that isn't sustainable. And it's really unfortunate. Wasn't Jessica Lange, when her character, something was supposed to happen before they got married? Wasn't she going to do something and then they were going to get married, but that didn't happen?
Well, I think she was trying to get him set up in business.
No, I think she was doing another beauty contest or something. She was supposed to be doing something for herself, and she said, yeah, let's get married after this happens. And he's like, no, let's not wait. So I think she put her shit on hold for him and got married, and then it just, you know, she had babies, and he just basically, she cared about him, she loved him, and I'm sure he loved her too, but he was so like, his vision was over here.
It was all about
and
him.
She was over here.
He had a very, you know, very conservative view of what a marriage is.
Yes.
And, you know, he's a product of that time.
Yep.
He saw, you know, everything was about like his success, and he can't see the fact that like when you're in a marriage, it's a partnership. So,
right. And that's why he couldn't be.
Yeah,
he couldn't be supportive of her.
He couldn't be happy for her when she's successful. It's like, you know, he couldn't see that her success is his success.
Yeah, and it's really interesting. So Timothy Hutton is like an old college friend of theirs.
It's his cousin.
It's his cousin. So they're tight. He's tight with Jessica Lange's character too. I think he kind of falls in love with her.
He's always kind of been in love with her. So he's kind of always been in love with both of them. So he's always had this thing where, you know, his cousin is a little bit older than him, like a year or two older than him. So he's always been the guy that he's looked up to. And, you know, so he kind of got to be a hanger-on with the whole situation that was happening there. But again, he's another person that ultimately
he moved on.
He rose above it. He becomes a college professor. He becomes a successful author. And, you know, it's just...
It's so interesting too, because there's a point in the movie where Timothy Hutton's character goes to visit them, and this is like what, 20 years or something after. And you know, he's telling them all about his life and stuff, and he's staying there with his new girlfriend and stuff, and Dennis Quaid's character starts talking about wanting to write a book. He's like, I want to write a book about my college days and, you know, all this stuff. And he's like all excited about it. And Timothy Hutton's like, And he asks
Yeah,
Timothy
he
Hutton.
wants him to write it.
He wants him to write it. And he's like, no. Because Dennis Quaid's character is always looking behind him.
Mm-hmm.
Always looking at the past. And Timothy Hutton's character is like, I don't want to do that anymore. I want to go this way.
And it's not just that. He's also not the guy who's hanging on his cousin's every word anymore.
That is true, yeah.
He's his own man now, and he's, he doesn't, he looks fondly enough at that time, but in a, in a normal, healthy way that you do when you look at your life, that way.
Right, but because, Dennis Quaid is so stuck in that time, it's just, like, hard for him to look anywhere else but himself. Because in college, the world revolved around him, and now it doesn't, and he has a hard time.
Yeah, and now he's gotten to a point where, there's a scene where he comes back to college, and it's like a reunion, and they're, they have the whole, the whoever's left of their team, on the field, and he's thinking it's kind of about him, and like, even like the young people that are going to school there now don't know really much about him, so everything has passed him by at this point. He can't even go back to his old alma mater and even relive some of the glory days in that fashion. So it's kind of this little sad scene at the end too. It felt like pretty true to, like, if you've ever met anyone who's like this, like who peak real early, and then you see them like later in life, like they were like the top shit in high school or whatever, and you see them later in life, you're like, wow.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just, it's a good movie.
Yeah.
It's really good. Performances were good.
Yeah. Our second Dennis Quaid appearance on this list. He appears 3 times, more than anyone else, which is kind of strange. There's another Dennis Quaid movie that's coming up in a bit.
Also, it was well acted and directed, and what was I gonna say? I don't know. I highly recommend you watch this. I lost my train of thought. But yeah, I highly recommend that you watch this. It's really good. Oh, it's the first movie, I think it's the first movie on this top 50 list that deals with post career, like looking back, so I thought that was an interesting approach.
Which is, for a lot of athletes, really, it's a really, really difficult time in their life.
Yeah, I can imagine.
It's good. I hadn't seen it in a really long time. It was also interesting to see as an older person. When I watched this, I was probably, the last time I saw this, I was probably in my teens or early 20s.
Yeah.
So seeing it now as someone who's kind of, had a little water under the bridge, it's really interesting to kind of look back on the story and kind of relate to Dennis Quaid, I think, a little bit more than a younger person can. So that was interesting.
Yeah, for sure.
I gave this one a 57. Jerry gave it a 67. So the list score is 62.
All right. If you have seen Everybody's All-American and you would like to make a comment about what you thought about the movie, please do so. If you'd like to message us directly, please do so at ratingthelist@gmail.com. I guess that's it for now. I'm Jerry.
I'm Brad.
And we're Rating the List. We'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.